war is brewing in the brand new anime series, The Heroic Legend of Arslan, otherwise known as Arslan Senki. I just got done watching the premiere episode and it was pretty good. It's kind of got me hooked right now, although it didn't really give us too much information. Basically, it's just establishing the world and the main character of the show. But I think it did a pretty good job. But before I go further into my review, let me give you guys a little bit of background about Arslan Senki. So, this is actually nothing new. In fact, it's actually based on an old Japanese novel series, which was also adapted into an anime OVA series in the mid-90s, and now we have the modern interpretation of the show. I've really been looking forward to this one for a number of reasons. One, it's a big, badass action anime war epic, and that's going to be pretty cool. But I'm also really looking forward to seeing all of the different characters and character designs, because they've all been designed by Hiromu Arakawa, otherwise known as the creator of Full Metal Alchemist. So safe to say, this show's got some good people working on it, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the story. So, the actual world of the heroic legend of Arslan is set back in this old medieval times where we have these multiple kingdoms who are fighting it out for control of everything. It actually opens up with a massive battle between these two kingdoms, the Kingdom of Meriam and the Kingdom of Lusitania, and it's a great way to start the series because it just establishes how badass it's really going to be. Both sides coming at each other all at once, spears, arrows flying. It's pretty freaking awesome. This series also seems like it's actually taking a page from the Berserk movie trilogy because they're using a lot of CG for all those multiple soldiers, for better or for worse. You either like that stuff or you don't. Frankly, I'd rather see hand-drawn soldiers, but that's just the way it is. But really, it just sort of sets up the multiple kingdoms of the show. Even though Lusitania is strong, the Meriam Kingdom actually have a very strong ally, the Pars Kingdom. And Pars is bad ass. They pretty much just conquer everyone with an iron fist. They also seem to be slightly corrupted, as their entire kingdom seems to be based on slavery and slave trades. So it's pretty messed up in that sense, but eventually Pars is able to defeat them and capture most of their soldiers and basically become one of the biggest, strongest kingdoms in the entire world. That brings us to the very beginning of the story where we're introduced to the main character, Prince Arslan himself. And yes, he basically does just look like a white-haired Edward Elric. The main character of the series, Arslan, is actually not your typical main character. He is the prince of this kingdom, but he seems to be oblivious to all of the horrible things that are going on inside of it with all the war and the slaves, and he himself is incredibly timid. He doesn't seem like he's the chosen one or has some sort of weird special powers. He's just a regular human, and he does everything in his power to try to become stronger, to try and impress his father, who's a complete and total badass, who has a name that is so cool, I can barely pronounce it. I think it was Dragorius? And guys, I'm gonna go ahead and say this right now. A lot of the names in this show are really hard to pronounce. So please bear with me as I try to say the names of some of these characters because they come from a lot of different places and I just don't know how to say it all. It's just ridiculous. Eventually, Arslan's father does return to the kingdom and he brings with him the spoils of war, which are victory and brand new slaves. These slaves actually originally belonged to the Lusitanian army, and we do have this one kid who's only about 11 years old, the same age as Arslan. He seems like he's basically going to be his rival for the show, or maybe even possible love interest. It's kind of hard to make out with that one weird scene when they were touching hands. But that's really beside the point. What happens is this kid gets captured, and he makes this quick escape when he gets tricked by these three kids, and then he runs into Arslan, and he ends up using him as a hostage, and that's when this huge, massive chase scene just ensues. And there's a few small moments where they actually get to talk to each other, where we really get to learn how ignorant Arslan really is to the rest of the world. You know, outside the kingdom, he doesn't really know much, and even everything that goes on within the kingdom, he mostly turns a blind eye to, whereas you have this other kid who is from the Lusitanian army, who has a strong belief in his religious faith, and is going to try and do everything in his power to bring down the kingdom of Pars, and he makes a really nice flashy escape, where where they're able to jump over this bridge, go into a moat, and there's this one other guy, I believe his name is Darian, who almost takes him out with an arrow. That was a really tense scene when he was on the horse at the very end and that arrow was about to hit him in the back. I was almost fully convinced it was going to happen and really take this episode into a much darker territory. But that's pretty much it. He makes his quick escape, and I am sure that he is going to run into Arslan again when he actually goes into his big, very first maiden battle, which is teased at the very end of this week's episode, when we go into another time skip. It doesn't seem like he's changed too much, really. We haven't really seen much of his personality in the 3 years which have passed at the very end of this week's episode. He looks a little older, a little wiser, but we're really just going to have to see. Really, this episode right here is just establishing, like, the big world, the characters that are going to be in it, and that's it. It's basically all just visual representation of what this whole show is going to be about. And honestly, I'm kind of excited to see where it's going, because the ending of the series has some amazing character designs for the characters of the show. Just the way their armor looks is so awesome. I think it's going to be really cool. So what's the rundown? On the very first episode of the heroic legend of Arslan, it was pretty good. Nothing too mind-blowing yet, but like a lot of first episodes of anime series, this one is just sort of like setting the foundation for the rest of the show, and it's basically trying to hook people in. I'm really interested to see where it's going, though, and it was a really bold decision to have this character of Arslan, who's not your typical main character, He's kind of like Shinji from Evangelion, but not so much like in the psychopath way. What I mean more is just he's incredibly timid, and he doesn't really want to be, like, forced into any of these war situations, despite the fact that he kind of has to if he wants to impress his father. And his actual father is interesting because there's a lot of scenes in the episodes where you see him interacting with the Queen of the Kingdom, and she seems almost just as devious and hardcore as the king himself, and almost seems like she's up to something, almost as if she has an ulterior motive, but I'm going to have to wait and see that. The thing I'm really most interested to see, though, is more of these big, epic battles. That's something that's actually been shown a lot in the show, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with them later on when they start introducing some of the main characters. Maybe we'll start to see some more outlandish, more anime-type stuff. I'm not really sure. This might be a series that's a little more grounded in realism, but I can't wait to see where that is going. Otherwise, nothing too crazy, just setting up the series. It had some really good atmosphere, some good music cues. The CG soldiers are going to be controversial with some people, and that goes for a lot of different shows that are using all of these big CG crowds for stuff in anime. I'm starting to see them pop up all the time. I noticed them when I was watching Parasite the Maxim, and I'm definitely noticing it when I'm watching this series right here. But it doesn't completely take me out of the experience. I'm still just sort of interested to see where this is going. And I'm really tempted to actually look at the original OVA series, but I want to go into this with a fresh mindset, not knowing what is going to happen, and just take it for what it is. And hopefully it just goes crazy and it gets better from here. That's really all I can say. It's a show that actually has a lot of promise, and you should definitely check it out if you are a fan of big action war anime, and if you love the character designs from Fullmetal Alchemist. So check it out. I'm going to give the very first episode of the series a 3 out of 5. Just a really good average first episode, but we're going to have to see what it's going to do from here. So check it out, guys. Pretty good stuff. Thank you guys for watching my review. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with all your friends, and make sure to tell me what you thought about this week's episode of the heroic legend of Arslan. What did you think of the very first episode of the series? Where do you think it's going from here? And did you have a favorite moment from the first episode? Please tell me in the comments section below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.